Hello, my name is Dan Salvato, and this is my GDQ submission for Yoshi's Story All Melons 2 Lap. I'll explain exactly what the run is in a bit, but since we're diving right in, I want to talk about Yoshi's mechanics first. Yoshi's Story is one of the most analog 2D platformers you'll ever see, with 360-degree motion on Yoshi's tongue, the egg crosshair, and so on. That's a big contributing factor to the precision at play. Furthermore, just about everything in this game makes Yoshi slow down, such as licking, throwing eggs, eating fruit, ground pounding, and fluttering. We have movement techniques to negate slowdown on all of these things, which you'll start seeing right away. For example, by eating while in the air and canceling the swallow animation with another tongue, you can avoid getting stuck in place. Throwing eggs normally makes you stop moving, but if you jump at the right time during the throw, you retain your momentum. Up ahead, you'll see me eat a melon through the floor and negate lag on a ground pound. So, these ground pounds that I use to flip over the elephants have about a second of lag to them. You have to use the laggy ground pound to flip over the elephant, but if you just need to uncover a hidden melon, then you can negate the lag by ground pounding when you're right next to the ground. The window for this is normally only a couple frames, but you'll see me charge an egg right before doing the ground pound, which increases the timing window and makes the trick more consistent. You'll see me do that in a second up ahead here. So every time I ground pound to eat a melon, you'll notice that I run forward, then jump, and turn around midair to eat the melon behind me. It's really precise to turn around without losing speed, but in the long run this saves a lot of time to start moving as soon as possible and eat the melon behind you instead. Occasionally, you'll see me collect these big red hearts called Power Hearts. Power Hearts unlock additional stages in the next world. I want to go to 2-2, so I need to collect a minimum of 1 Power Heart to unlock that level. A big part of routing is figuring out which order to play the levels in based on which Power Hearts are the fastest to collect. Normally you have to collect all 3 Power Hearts for the last melon to spawn in this level, but the trigger is actually larger than the Power Heart itself, so you'll see me tongue jump to reach this blue block with my head, which is enough to hit the trigger for the last melon to spawn. So just a couple more ground pound melons, and that concludes 1-1, the easiest level in the game. So now you'll see me reset the console to skip a cutscene, which I'll do after every level. So back to the purpose of the run itself, why all melons? Melons are actually a collectible in Yoshi's Story, and there are exactly 30 of them in every level. All melons is a way of achieving maximum completion in the game. 2 lap means we're going to beat the game twice, playing different levels each time. It's 6 levels per lap, so if you want to beat all 24 levels, it would be a 4-lap run. The next level is 2-2, Blarg's Boiler, one of my favorite levels because you almost never need to stop moving as long as your movement is technical enough. Earlier, I mentioned something called tongue jumping. This means mashing the tongue button while jumping, which lets you gain significant amounts of height in your jump. You'll see me do it a lot in this level. The faster you mash B, the higher you go. But this is incredibly difficult because you need to mash B while holding A. And if you go for the tongue jump, you can't flutter, so you have to pick one or the other for gaining height. Notice again how every time I eat something, I'm using my tongue to cancel the swallow, so by the time I land, I start running right away without having to wait for the swallow to finish. So every 6 melons I collect, a super happy fruit spawns. While Yoshi is super happy, his tongue is twice as long, his ground pounds kill Shy Guys, his flutters are easier, and he has infinite eggs. And of course he's invincible. The extra long tongue and the infinite eggs are especially useful. Thanks to infinite eggs, you can repeatedly cancel egg throws to add eggs to your inventory, and if you're clever with the timing, you can do it without slowing down. Up ahead we have a couple of insane tongue jumps which show you just how much height Yoshi can gain. Also, normally when you try to eat fruit in the air, Yoshi plummets like a rock, but doing it at the correct point in a flutter lets you gain a little extra distance, which gets me to safety here. The most infamous part of 2-2 is a technique to skip this rolling ball, which has evolved many times over the years. By spacing out your flutters and licks in an exact pattern, you can eat all 3 melons while narrowly avoiding falling to your death. You also see me zoom in the camera by holding R, which affects the spawn timing of the last Shy Guy. It ensures that he's within reach of me by the time I do that last flutter. Speaking of flutters, if you hold up on the control stick while fluttering, you can do a high flutter. You get more height, but you also have to fall farther before fluttering again, and you have less horizontal control. Both kinds of flutters are very useful in different situations. Some levels have this minigame where you have to carry a stack of melons to the finish line. Kind of a nightmare for casual play, but we've learned to balance the stack perfectly, so you can run through the minigame at full speed, using jumps to correct the tilt of the stack as you go. This ground pound is a small mistake. It's really easy to accidentally ground pound in this game, because you do so just by pushing down on the control stick. Certain actions such as licking downwards or throwing an egg downwards requires extra precautions in your inputs to avoid ground pounding. And this concludes 2-2. I play Yoshi's Story on the Wii Virtual Console. My main reason is that I find the GameCube controller much more comfortable for this game, but the VC version is actually faster. The game runs at a full 60 frames per second on N64, which is actually really impressive for the time, but the screen transition animations, of all things, are really laggy. On VC they don't lag. Even though resetting takes longer on VC, the time saved from the screen transitions actually ends up making it the faster version of the game to run. So next we have 3-4, Fruseration. Why you would name a level Fruseration, I don't know. It says something about the level design, or maybe Nintendo of America was just pissed off at this level for some reason. You're supposed to roll in these big wheels to cross the gaps, but it's slow, so let's just flutter our way across. Again, you'll see some crafty flutters and lick timings, which comfortably gets us across. I also slightly manipulate the spawn position of this bird to use him as a footstool. Up ahead I have a setup where I stand on an exact position on the seesaw and throw an egg to destroy 3 blocks at once. If you throw an egg into a block, you can only destroy the one, but if you blow it up in midair and let the explosion do the work, you can take out several. For this next wheel, I have to jump through a gap in the middle because they put an invisible wall on the top of the wheel to prevent cheating. Good job, Nintendo. And at the end here, you can see me cancel my flutter with a few quick mashes of the tongue. It gets you just enough height out of the flutter to cross the gap. In fact, you're probably wondering why using your tongue gets you extra height. The reason is that whenever Yoshi changes states in the air, he has one frame where gravity is not applied to his velocity. So every tongue is one frame where gravity isn't being applied to Yoshi. The same actually holds true for things like throwing eggs, and later in the run you'll see some extremely complicated maneuvers where I flutter and throw eggs at the same time to get just enough height. Here's another good example of extending your tongue through the floor to eat a normally out-of-reach melon. And here's another melon stack minigame, where it looks like I actually pass right through this enemy right here, but it's because I selected the bottom path while in midair, so we're not on the same plane as each other. Just a funny visual anomaly that comes from a game pretending to be 3D when it's not. And that concludes 3-4. But wait, there's more! This is our first boss fight. Each of the bosses in this game have a quick kill technique, which lets you take them out before they have much of a chance to do anything. For this one, oh, never mind, it's already over. GG. Oh yeah, you might also be wondering why I always picked a green Yoshi. The reason is that he's the fastest one to select, not just because the cursor is already on him, but because he runs off the screen the fastest to start the level. But for marathons, we usually let the Yoshi color be a donation incentive. Next up is 4-3, Piranha Grove. This level is ridiculously hard, both casually and in a speedrun. You have these flying piranhas that try and eat you. If they do, it's a 10-second time loss and you lose all your eggs. They try to lick you, but just touching them will get you eaten too. And being invincible doesn't save you. Look at how narrowly I need to avoid these guys with some precise tongue jumping. Now I have to get 6 eggs, and I need all 6 of them for this room. If I miss a single egg shot, or if I get eaten by a piranha, I'm getting a pretty major time loss. Even after doing this for 5 years, I get nervous every time. On this guy, I take damage on purpose to save an egg. After getting past that first part, I get to relax a little bit while pushing a box across the room. Just take the time to listen to how bumpin' this music is. Anyway, I zoom in the camera here to make the Super Happy Fruit spawn a little bit lower, and then I cancel a few egg throwers to add 3 eggs to my inventory to prepare for the next room. Really tricky egg shot here right off the bat. and I miss, so I just have to take a quick detour to make up for it. The next bit is some pretty badass looking platform movement, which is only possible if you have extremely fast movement and catch all the cycles perfectly. And over here you need some difficult tongue jumps too. I have to hit this block 10 times to make a melon come out, and if I fall there's a risk of it despawning and losing the melon forever. That's one thing I've neglected to mention so far. If you accidentally despawn a melon, or you even accidentally eat a different fruit, you're screwed. You have to start the level all over. That is the sheer brutality of all melons. Anyway, I make a minor movement mistake on these red platforms, which forces me to wait an extra cycle to get onto the platforms I need. No big deal. This is just me being cool and risking a 20-second time loss by getting this melon without killing the piranhas first. This part's pretty interesting because the game tries to force you to take the rolling ball by setting up checkpoints before the camera moves forward and lets you continue. But you can fall through this narrow sliver to avoid using the ball, and then flutter through these enemies to get to the vase, where we have another melon stack minigame. Not all too much to talk about in this last section of the level, just a few precise flutters and egg shots to finish up the melons. You know what's crazy? The Japanese version of this game actually has different movement mechanics for Yoshi, so you have to relearn a lot of muscle memory if you want to play on the Japanese version. We usually don't because you can't skip cutscenes on that version, but Yoshi's Story had a pretty active Japanese community for a while, which encouraged me to learn that version too. In the Japanese version, Yoshi can't jump while his tongue is out, and if you land while swallowing, you can't jump again until he's done. Most interestingly though, he doesn't stop moving while swallowing at all, so you can eat fruits on the ground without losing speed. Next we have 5-4, where this ship in the background fires bob-ombs at you through the whole first room. Seems like it would be annoying, but you can just despawn them right when they're fired by backtracking a tiny bit. By the way, look at how quickly Yoshi can turn around in midair. Instead of waiting for him to accelerate in the opposite direction, I flutter for a couple frames, which overrides his momentum and lets me reverse my momentum instantly. I use that a fair amount in key places throughout the run. Here's another instance where I despawn the bob-ombs. I have a precise setup here to break the blocks and eat the falling melon, but I accidentally slip and fall down there myself. Only waste a couple seconds since a crafty tongue jump gets me out of there. And finally, you see me use the super happy ability to kill Shy Guys by ground pounding. I have to ground pound to get this melon anyway, so I choose a laggy ground pound to get the Shy Guy out of my way at the same time. Here you see me zoom in the camera to make the Shy Guy spawn sooner. Normally you have to stall for a second to wait for him to fly past the banana. Remember, if you eat the banana by accident, it's all over. And for that minigame you just saw me play, I have an optimal jumping pattern mapped out to get me to the top the fastest. If you lick one of the red balls by accident, you have to suffer through a lagging animation, so the tongue jumps I do are precise and planned out in advance to minimize the risk of making that mistake. On this part, I get some unpredictable seagull spawns because I slightly messed up my movement. To minimize the time loss, I get to work gaining as much height as I can from flutters before finding a seagull to land on. Doing perfect flutters while charging and canceling eggs in between is one of the most difficult movement techniques to pull off. So, a little bit of history on myself as a speedrunner. I started running Yoshi's Story about 6 years ago. It was a time at which Yoshi's Island was at its peak popularity, and Yoshi's Story had no attention whatsoever. The only existing run was any percent, and it was only 12 minutes long. I found it so weird that a Nintendo platformer, and a game that I grew up on, had such little speedrun representation, but it inspired me to get more out of the game. So, over several years, I routed out the all Melons categories, and I discovered a ton of new tech along the way. I still hold the record in every major category, but over the past year or two, Yoshi's Story has seen some major community growth, and we're more popular than ever, with about 8 active runners, and a bunch more who are interested but on a hiatus. Still sounds pretty small time, but it feels amazing after being the only active runner for so long. Anyway, this is 6-2, the last level of the first lap. You'll notice I start off by running left. Well, Yoshi's Story has a handful of stages that are kind of an open map instead of just left to right. I always wondered why we didn't see more of those in a game where reaching the end of the stage isn't the goal. So I zoom in here to put the saw blades on a cycle that lets me squeeze through without slowing down at all. If I hit one of these bouncy balls, it's a disaster because it messes up all the cycles, and it's really easy to get stuck bouncing around for a while. In this room, you're supposed to use the umbrella to float your way to the bottom, collecting melons along the way. But why do that when you could just dive down at full speed and accomplish the same thing? I also wake up that warp for safety in case I miss a melon and need to warp back to the top. I don't think I talked about that yet. Each level has 4 warps that you can wake up and warp between them. Again, makes sense for a game about collecting things, but we only use it once during the run. Here we have some precise jumps and egg throws to get these melons while avoiding damage. I take damage on this last guy, but it doesn't matter because I have to wait for that thing to stop blowing at me anyway. This next room has an auto-scroller. It's this platform attached to a track that you have to ride around and get all the melons. In the old route, that is. We're good enough at the game now that we can devise some really complicated flutter patterns to eat all of the melons on the track, spawning them at the perfect times to put them on a convenient cycle. That is, if you're good enough to make absolutely 0 mistakes during the entire sequence. Unfortunately, I barely missed this melon. I licked about 2 frames too late. I'm losing time, but more importantly, I need to clutch out a save to keep from falling to my death. Finally, in the last room, there's a hidden switch with 2 extra melons, but I activate the minigame first to save a few seconds of waiting around. I get the 2 melons in time to catch the first part of the stack, but they up the difficulty with the melon stack minigame in World 6, where you have to catch the boxes one by one. Coming up in a bit, you're going to see the Bowser fight. If you throw eggs at Bowser, they bounce right off, but you can still damage him with the explosions. It's weird because Nintendo set up this really involved fight with like spikes on the ceiling and bob-ombs you can use for damage, but you can kill him just by throwing a bunch of eggs. The optimal setup involves going into the fight with 3 eggs, so you can damage him 3 times, then eat a super happy fruit and get infinite eggs for phase 2. Look at how this lingering egg explosion actually damages Bowser a second time when he starts phase 2. It's so silly. I mean, only speedrunners are going to do it like this, but it's still funny how it's possible to make it this easy. And this is the end of lap 1. We finished 6 levels, now we have 6 more to go. The beauty of 2-lap is that you get to play all the best levels while avoiding all the worst. A complete 4-lap run is an hour and 45 minutes long, but this one is less than 45 minutes, which is a great length. I hope you're enjoying watching so far. Every level presents some really unique challenges, so there's a lot of cool stuff coming up still. Oh yeah, so the plot behind this game is that Baby Bowser steals the Super Happy Tree, and for some reason turns the whole world into a storybook, so the Yoshis go on a quest to reclaim the Super Happy Tree and spread happiness throughout the land. In fact, your health meter is really just Yoshi's happiness level, and when you die, it's just Yoshi getting really sad. Well, unless you get eaten, or smashed flat, or boiled in lava, lots of ways you can actually die in this game. So to start off lap 2, we're going to 1-3 Rail Lift, which is called that because there are all these platforms you have to ride, or in our case, not ride. The first room is simple enough, just have to navigate through some hilly terrain and grab a few melons along the way. Unfortunately, I mess up my movement quite a bit in this room, but it gives you a really good glimpse of just how slippery these controls really are. A lot of runs die not because you make a big mistake, but because you make a small mistake and it just keeps escalating while you try to get yourself back on track. The next room has a bunch of platforms to ride, but we're just going to eat a Super Happy Fruit and use our extra long tongue to grab a couple melons off screen and get some clever bounces off the obstacles here. The melons are moving and swinging around, so you really have to know your cycles too. And over in this last room we have a lot more moving platforms we're going to skip over. First we have this section where we need to balance on these guys while eating melons that are swinging all around, again really cycle dependent. And after that we're going to skip over a huge network of rails by getting some good flutters. I'll be coming back in a second to get those melons. Here I ate another Super Happy Fruit and use it again to take advantage of my extra long tongue. You can really see how much that comes in handy. "2-1 is Bone Dragon Pit, one of the levels full of fond childhood memories for many people. Starting off, we have to grab this melon in the middle of a bunch of falling enemies, really difficult to not take damage here. And most of these bone dragons we're just going to skip over, provided we're fast enough before they start attacking us. I get a little thrown off here because when you're not at full health, your egg explosions are a lot smaller and it makes me miss this bubble. In this part you have to be particularly fast, throwing a precise egg shot to break both of these blocks and getting the Super Happy Fruit before this bone dragon has time to extend his neck all the way. Then we ground pound to get all this garbage out of the way and have the Lakitu in the perfect position to steal his cloud and get up to this secret spot. And here's a mini-boss I need to fight, and it takes all 6 eggs to defeat him. There's also like a square in the ground with a missing texture there, kind of weird. Just something that happens sometimes in this game. I think it happens more often on Virtual Console, where it just like doesn't load in for some reason. Here we have these platforms that are kind of reminiscent of 1-2 in Super Mario Bros. We just try to get in some good tongue jumps to spend as little time riding the platforms as possible. Finally, in this last section, I eat a super happy fruit and use some pretty technical maneuvers to get all these ground pound melons as quickly as I can. This one tongue jump is really difficult and I mess it up once, before smoothly cleaning up the rest of the melons. Next level is 3-1 Cloud Cruising. Kind of a weird level. You have like these worms that you have to ride on through the sky. But you have to admit the variety in the game's level design is pretty impressive sometimes, especially for 1998. Watch how I charge and cancel an egg throw during this flutter. It actually gives me a tiny bit of extra height that I need to reliably get onto the cloud here. Now for these guys, I have a jumping pattern to try to make them as consistent as possible, because you could just slip right off of them so easily. I get them to the exact height that I need before jumping to the next platform. And this green guy from like the very bottom of the stage is just all up in my face. Completely ruins my jump and the cycle on all these Shy Guys, so I have no choice but to just wing it. In this next room, the developers were kind enough to give us a hidden super happy fruit, which we can use to kill all the Shy Guys in the background without having to wait for them to arrive. Our prize for killing them all is 5 melons. So a while back I mentioned there's one spot in this run where we use a warp, and this is the spot. First we have to ride the dragon across to get a bunch of melons, then we have to return and go into a secret room to finish up the level. Since all the melons are at different heights, it's probably not possible to save time by skipping the dragon, but who knows, maybe one day. I mean, we did it for the 6-2 auto-scrollers, so... After you get the super happy fruit, you can actually try to outrun the dragon by using these bees as platforms, but it's a bit of a crapshoot since they spawn randomly, so you can just get unlucky. So now we warp back, and you probably saw me skip a switch the first time around, but we're going to hit that now and get to the secret room. The melons are almost always placed around quite intelligently so that you don't have to do any backtracking to get them all, but there are a couple exceptions, this being one of them. Now I just have to climb up all these platforms and eat some melons along the way. I never like doing this because you just can't see where you're going, like the camera doesn't want to keep up with you, since it really wasn't designed for this kind of vertical platforming in mind, I guess. So we have another boss, this time it's Cloud and Candy. All you have to do is lick him to death. We have a quick kill where if you get some really good mashing, you can take him out without even touching the ground. But my positioning is slightly off, so I have to wait an extra hop to finish him off. Alright, next we have 4-2 Jungle Puddle, another level with fond childhood memories, or I guess specifically nightmares. There's this giant red fish that chases you around and tries to eat you. As someone who's been playing this game since I was in kindergarten, I can confirm that it was terrifying. But this is also, I think, the first water that we see in this run. Similar to his other mechanics, Yoshi also has 360-degree movement while swimming. It's clear that Nintendo wanted to capitalize on the brand new analog stick for the N64. Swimming feels pretty good, but whenever you use your tongue, it seems to just go all over the place. It's really hard to control. And for some reason, it's really hard to get out of the water, too. Like, you just have to hold A and wait for Yoshi to jump out of the water whenever he feels like it. But for most of the level, we get to stay on dry land. As soon as I get this super happy fruit, I'm on a timer because I need to reach the end of the room in time to use my extra long tongue to grab a melon out of the water. Also, every time I run off a ledge, I charge and cancel an egg to gain extra eggs without losing speed. Alright, here we go. Quick turnaround onto the ledge and perfect angle into the water. Yeah, I make it look pretty easy now, but it took me forever to get this consistent. Really easy to grab a fish with your tongue instead, or get knocked around until you're forced to do the swim of shame to get the melon instead. Here's that giant nightmare fish. You have to push these boxes together while he gets ready to jump out at you. But thankfully, if your movement is the exact same every time, his movement is the same as well. Except I mess up a little bit here, and that makes him kind of unpredictable and terrifying. Oh my god. Alright, we're good. This is actually one of the hardest melon stack minigames. They make you jump up these blocks while trying to balance the stack. I usually take it pretty slow because there's really no way to consistently do it at full speed. Okay, now we have the blue fish. Instead of jumping out, this guy likes to squirt water at you and try to push you into the water so he can eat you. He actually really used to get in the way when we did some box pushing, but one of us devised a strategy to temporarily despawn him while we finish pushing the box. You'll notice in a bit that I pushed the box slightly farther than needed so I can jump up on the right side instead of the left. Somehow this manipulates the camera to keep the fish out of the way. Okay, we have 2 levels left, but the next one, 5-3, is special. This is, I think, one of my proudest contributions to Yoshi's story, and it's a testament to how much we've really conquered this game. The level starts off with a Lakitu who throws spiked balls, but he has a 1 in 10 chance of throwing a melon. He has 5 melons in total, so you have to sometimes sit around for an extra 20 or 30 seconds trying to get him to throw all the melons. But one day, someone thought, hold on, we're resetting the game in between every level. Doesn't that mean the RNG also gets reset to the default value? Well, it turns out that if you take an exact number of footsteps at certain exact time intervals, you can manipulate the RNG and get the Lakitu to throw 5 melons in a row. It's something that by all means should be TAS only, but here we are. You're going to see some weird movement from me, but the Lakitu will throw 4 melons, then 2 spiked balls, and then the 5th melon once he's across the pit. And to finish it off, I get a bounce off the Shy Guy and hijack the cloud to speed up the next section. It always feels amazing to pull off the whole trick. Anyway, up ahead, I'm going to use the cloud to enter a pipe, because if you enter the pipe from the cloud, Yoshi's pipe entry animation is about 1 second shorter. Kind of weird, but I'll take it. Here we have a new type of minigame where you have to flutter as far as you can. Flutters are easy for us speedrunners, so I focus less on the actual fluttering and more on mashing tongue at the perfect times to get a tiny bit more distance. And I'm short on eggs, so I get the super happy fruit and generate a couple eggs before going in the pipe. This is a really hectic level, but it's pretty linear, so it's all about avoiding running into stuff while maintaining your momentum and staying on cycle. I also need to make sure I have 6 eggs going into the next room, so I do that while super happy. Up next, you normally jump up a bunch of platforms to reach the melons in the clouds, but by charging egg throws while fluttering, I can get just enough height to make it to the clouds without the platforms. It really destroys my hands to try to pull this off, but it's always worth it because it looks cool as heck. And just after that, we have this really cool sequence where I get all these melons with really tight timing, then use the enemy to boost myself forward at high speed. Now we're just finishing up the last few melons. There's a terrible cluster of enemies at the end that I have to try to maneuver around, and I'm also short an egg, so I have to eat a Shy Guy before he flies away. That's it for 5-3. I just love how cool that level has gotten with all the new tricks. And that brings us to our last level, 6-4. The key element of 6-4 is yet another autoscroller skip, but this time around, the trick is to despawn the autoscroller by escaping from a pit that's supposed to be too deep. It's at the end of the level, and it saves about 1.5 minutes. But now that the run is almost over, I hope you found it fascinating how much we managed to manipulate Yoshi's mechanics to get him to do all kinds of crazy stuff without slowing down. Considering how clunky it can feel to play on surface level, it's an absolute pleasure to see what kind of potential we can wring out of it. I watch all kinds of speedruns every day, but this is the only game that I speedrun, and I expect it to remain that way for a very long time. So starting off, we just have to take a quick detour to grab this one melon, then we can be on our way with some solid flutters to get across a big lava pit. Earlier in 3-1 we had to take the green dragon, but this time around the red dragon will have to be lonely. So a big part of this level will be these little streams of lava that pour out of the pipes, and trying to control their cycle and get past them without having to wait around. This whole room is really cycle driven, so clean movement is pretty important. Look at how narrowly I can run under this one lava stream. It's only possible if you get a perfect jump off of the platform. Don't eat the grapes. You know, that's happened to quite a few poor souls. Anyway, right here I have to match my speed to the lava stream, so it makes for a good time to generate some eggs. Ah, yes, these guys. Perfect for a children's game. That's not gonna keep any kids awake at night. So anyway, this room is pretty challenging because you have all these balls bouncing around while you're trying to push boxes together. We have a pretty good cycle, so it's not too bad, but sometimes one of them comes at you when you don't expect it to be there. Oh yeah, sometimes you see the coins spelling out letters when Yoshi is super happy. If you find them all, it spells out, "You are Yoshi's great partner." That was part of Nintendo of America's efforts to add more replay value with like an incentive for collectibles, I guess. This last room is full of some really narrow corridors, and you have to crawl under the saw blades if you don't want to take damage. Another analog stick feature of the game, you can crawl around. But the angle is like so precise if you don't want to lose your speed, so it's actually really difficult to do fast. In fact, it's basically like shield dropping in Melee. It's almost the same controller input. And coming up is the auto-scroller skip I mentioned. First I take damage to prevent the left Shy Guy from moving forward, and then I flutter while throwing several eggs at precise times to get barely enough height to escape the pit. Yeah, this whole section here you would normally have to take at like a snail's pace in between the two Shy Guys, but they don't respawn after we despawn them, so we can just run through at full speed. Now just one more Bowser fight, except this time I only have one egg. No big deal because you can use the egg to stun him, and then you have enough time to grab the Super Happy Fruit and finish him off. And that is the end of Yoshi's Story All Melons 2-Lap. My time for this run was about 43 minutes and 40 seconds. I pointed out most of the mistakes I made, but overall it was a pretty clean run. This is about the performance that I would expect in a marathon setting. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to watch the run in full, and for considering its inclusion in the upcoming GDQ. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to another great year for speedrunning.